Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
Thank you for your awesome support on Patreon, the Kessel Run DX Solo. And thank you so much for sending this signed World Heavyweight Championship belt. I'm gonna hold it up I'm gonna hold it this way, like David Arquette. Hello and welcome to the WrestleTalk Mega News. I am Luke Owen. Give us a subscribe and press that little thumbs up button to help us battle the ever-changing YouTube algorithms. On January 1st this year, an episode of Being the Elite confirmed a long-standing rumor they were about to launch a new wrestling company called All Elite Wrestling. Cody and the Young Bucks then held a press conference in Jacksonville, Florida, the home of Jason Mendoza, where they revealed some of the new roster, including former WWE stars Chris Jericho and Pac. As if by coincidence, and I'm sure it was all just coincidence, there were a lot of reports that several WWE stars were unhappy with the company and wanted to see if the grass really was greener on the other side. This included names like Mike and Maria Kanellis, Hideo Itami, Dean Ambrose, Ty Dillinger, Luke Harper, Sasha Banks, and Goldust. While Maria denied the reports that she wanted to leave, Itami, Dillinger, Goldust, and Ambrose did quit WWE, with Itami going back to his old name of Kenta in New Japan, and Dillinger, Goldust, and Ambrose signing with All Elite Wrestling as Shawn Spears, Dustin Rhodes, and Jon Moxley. Mike Kanellis did sign a new big money contract along with his wife Maria, which turned out to be a really smart move, but has since asked for his release via social media. Similarly, Luke Harper vented his frustrations on Twitter and asked for his release, but reportedly has had 6 months added to his contract due to an injury he suffered in 2018. Harper did return to WWE for a hashtag 3-week push with former Wyatt family member and Bludgeon brother Eric Rowan before the two were drafted to separate brands, where Harper hasn't done anything and Rowan continues to get a big push, because despite all of his rage, Rowan's now got a pet in a cage. Sin Cara also recently asked for his release on Twitter, but at the time of this recording, Kanellis, Harper, and Sin Cara have not been granted their releases, even though they asked quite politely. More on ACH later. The other names included in all of those early reports were former Raw, SmackDown, and NXT Tag Team Champions, The Revival. Dave Meltzer reported in January that Dash Wilder and Scott Dawson were very unhappy with their position in WWE, as well as being unhappy with the company's stop-start push of the tag team division, one week taking it seriously and the other week not. This has been seen throughout 2019, most recently with The Revival winning the SmackDown Tag Team Championships at Clash of Champions from New Day in September, to then only wrestle on TV once in October in a losing effort before losing at Crown Jewel and dropping the belt back to New Day in November. In fact, it was reported the Revival only won the Raw Tag Team Championships in February from Bobby Roode and Chad Gable because they asked for their releases. And don't worry, I also forgot that Roode and Gable were Raw Tag Champs this year as well. Neither Dawson or Wilder denied the reports that they'd asked for their releases, but it didn't go unnoticed that Dash Wilder had filed for the trademark hashtag FTR around the time they reportedly asked for their release for entertainment in the nature of wrestling contests, entertainment services, namely wrestling exhibits and performances by a professional wrestler and entertainer. FTR was from a friendly Twitter rivalry between the Revival and the Young Bucks back in 2017, when the two teams were arguing over who really was the best tag team on the planet. While Wilder's trademark of FTR stands for Forever the Revival, the original genesis from Matt and Nick Jackson stood for Fork the Revival. It was reported the Revival's release request, like Harper, Mike Kanellis, and Sin Cara's, was turned down, with Meltzer reporting back in January that their contracts weren't up until 2020. But although their request was turned down, could they simply pull a Jon Moxley and not re-sign? There hasn't been a lot of news on the Revival and their WWE contracts, but they were recently tagged in an Instagram post from Randy Orton with the phrase TikTok, along with fellow WWE wrestlers Elias and Riddick Moss, along with AEW's Cody Rhodes and Chris Jericho. It's since been announced that Orton decided not to follow up on his elite level teasers and signed a new 5-year deal with WWE instead. However, Dawson and Wilder could be going in the opposite direction. Teasers for this began earlier this week when a photo of the Revival doing the Young Bucks pose pose was shared from the European tour, which Scott Dawson has now made his Twitter profile picture, something Matt Jackson seemed rather interested in. And this was changed from the previous profile picture, which was the Survivor Series 3-way tag match that he and Wilder were removed from, as New Day are now the SmackDown Tag Champions. But that's all just silly Twitter fun. More interesting is Dawson's recent Instagram post where he said, "Rarely do I ever post about my family, but I haven't been home with my girls consistently for more than 2 days in 3 months' time. These are the times you realize money really isn't everything. Do what you love and what makes you happy. That's the plan. Highway run." His tag partner Wilder replied to the post, "Screw the money, let's be happy." This is likely a reference to the big money deals that WWE have been offering talent that have their contracts coming up. Ever since the announcement of AEW in January, there have been reports that WWE were looking to nail down anyone with new 5-year deals for way more money than had been offered previously. This included Luke Gallows, Carl Anderson, and AJ Styles of the OC, who did sign, and Dean Ambrose, who opted not to and instead went to AEW. In fact, Jim Ross said in an interview with Busted Open Radio earlier this year, "I asked about one guy in WWE who's an undercard guy, been there for a while, solid hand, could help the younger guys learn because he's at that age now, early 30s, and they say, well, he's not available, he just signed for $500,000. He's not even on television. $500K just to keep him off the streets, so to speak." As mentioned earlier, the Revival's contracts reportedly end next year, so it will be interesting to see over the next few months if they start to get a bigger push on TV in order to appease them, like WWE did earlier this year by giving them the Raw Tag Team titles, and then hope that they re-sign like the OC and Orton, or if the duo goes silent and just ride out their contracts and join All Elite Wrestling like Jon Moxley did. But what do you all think? Should the Revival leave and head over to AEW, or should they stick with WWE? Let me know in the comments down below, because I'll be replying to them in the first 30 minutes of this video going live. Someone else who replied to Dawson's Instagram post was NXT commentator Beth Phoenix, who asked for the Revival to come back and play with them on the Black and Gold brand, which is something we've seen a lot of recently due to the NXT Invasion storyline leading into Survivor Series, with the OC having a match last week and Bayley being flown over from the European tour just to shoot an angle with Shayna Baszler on this week's show. The Survivor Series storyline had a positive effect on NXT ratings last week, with the show coming very close to beating AEW Dynamite. However, this week was not the same story, as AEW had a post-pay-per-view bump to get their highest rating since October 23rd, pulling in 957,000 viewers. NXT, on the other hand, dropped 8% to pull in 750,000. Dynamite finished 5th in the night overall in the important 18 to 49 demographic, while NXT was 22nd, down 17% from last week. In fact, AEW nearly doubled NXT in the 18 to 49 male demographic. An interesting note from these ratings, though, comes from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, which writes, "When AEW's show ends, NXT gets a huge bump of somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 viewers. But when NXT goes to a commercial break, there is very little of their audience that goes to AEW. This seems to indicate that most WWE regular fans will not watch AEW, but a percentage of the AEW audience will switch to NXT. But most of the switching takes place during the commercial breaks and after the show, and not during the periods when AEW is on the air." But what about former NXT star Jordan Myles, or ACH as he wants to be known as again? One of the biggest news stories of 2019 has come from former Jordan Myles, aka ACH, taking on WWE over accusations of racism. This started when ACH tweeted about his displeasure over a poorly thought out WWE t-shirt design, which led to him going on a Twitter tirade against the company, as well as targeting other wrestling promotions and other African American wrestlers like former ROH champion Jay Lethal. On Wednesday, the story came back into the forefront when ACH tweeted a video that said he was quitting WWE. In the since deleted video, because ACH has removed all of his Twitter profile, he said, "As of today, I quit forking WWE. I am no longer employed by them. I refuse to work for racist. I forking quit. I hate them. I hate that forking company and everything they forking stand for." Holy forking shirt balls. As of the time of this recording, ACH has not been released by WWE. So although he has quit, he is still under contract with them. And yet, despite still being signed with WWE, Dave Meltzer is reporting via the Wrestling Observer newsletter that ACH has been in contact with at least one promotion wanting to appear, but does note that this is unlikely as there is no indication he's been released by WWE. Meltzer also notes that WWE has very much tried to help him weeks before he went public with his issues and at the time he disappeared from Orlando. But where do you think ACH will end up? Vote in the poll above my head to have your voice heard. This of course likely means that ACH will not be around for NXT Invasion of Survivor Series, which for the first time will see Raw clash with SmackDown and the Black and Gold brands. Already announced are a Raw vs SmackDown vs NXT men's 5-on-5 match, a women's 5-on-5 match, Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch taking on SmackDown Women's Champion Bayley and NXT Women's Champion Shayna Baszler, NXT Tag Team Champions Undisputed Era taking on Raw Tag Champs Viking Raiders and SmackDown Tag Champs New Day, and United States Champion AJ Styles versus North American Champion Roderick Strong versus Intercontinental Champion Shinsuke Nakamura. But rather than there be a three-way between WWE Champion Brock Lesnar, Universal Champion Bray Wyatt, and NXT Champion Adam Cole, baby, it was announced that Lesnar will defend against Rey Mysterio. This left a question mark over what Cole will be doing on the show and what's next for new Universal Champion Bray Wyatt. According to Dave Meltzer, however, that question might have been answered, with Big Daddy Meltzer reporting that Wyatt will defend the Universal title against Daniel Bryan, which was set up on SmackDown this past week, and WWE have advertised a Miz TV segment with Bryan for tonight's show. Interestingly, Meltzer reports that Bryan was originally slated to win the Intercontinental Championship and be added to the mid-title three-way, but his storyline with Shinsuke Nakamura has now been dropped so he can instead be put into the Wyatt match. Meltzer also adds that Adam Cole will likely be the captain of Team NXT in the men's 5-on-5 match. It's also been reported that Rusev vs Lashley, which has been building for a number of weeks on TV, will not feature on Survivor Series as the card is already too full, and will instead be on December's TLC show. Also advertised for that show thus far, according to a list sent to the building by WWE for advertising purposes, is Kabuki Warriors defending the Women's Tag Team Championships against Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair, and Roman Reigns versus King Corbin, which could be a dog collar match according to Meltzer. But as always, hard subject to change. Did CM Punk really turn down a big money offer from AEW to join WWE backstage? You can watch that as well as Laurie and housemate Simon's review of NXT by clicking the videos on screen right now. Thank you for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon pledge hammers, some of which you could see scrolling their way into my stomach. I've been Luke Owen, this has been a championship belt, and that was wrestling.